At a sleepy corner store in Santa Monica, Elon Musk was about to stumble into one of those moments, and neither he nor the woman he'd meet would ever be the same again. The rain had just started falling over Santa Monica, painting the streets in shimmering ribbons of gold and gray under the streetlights. Elon Musk, wearing a worn black hoodie and jeans, pulled his Tesla quietly into the parking lot of a tiny convenience store he had spotted off the main road. It wasn't where he usually stopped. His assistants typically handled grocery runs, but tonight was different. Tonight, after a brutal 12-hour marathon of meetings about regulatory hurdles and production issues, he needed a few minutes of normalcy. He just wanted a bottle of sparkling water, maybe some fruit. Something small. Something real. Inside, the store was almost empty. The hum of the old refrigerators filled the silence. Elon grabbed a basket and quickly tossed in a few items. A pack of blueberries. A bottle of mineral water. A chocolate bar he'd probably regret later. As he approached the single open checkout lane, he noticed her. She stood ahead of him, tiny, no taller than 5'1", wrapped in a faded navy raincoat with a sagging grocery bag tucked under one arm. She was counting coins carefully in her wrinkled hands, whispering numbers under her breath, as the young cashier, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, waited patiently. "That'll be $37.89, the cashier said. The woman looked up, her brown eyes apologetic behind thick glasses. "Could you take off the cat food?" she asked softly. "And the milk? Maybe the eggs too." The cashier nodded, scanning the items back in. Elon watched, something twisting uncomfortably in his chest. He'd seen moments like this before, in passing. Always in passing. But something about the way this woman stood, dignified but tired, proud but worn down, made him pause. He shifted his weight, feeling that internal nudge he never ignored. As the cashier voided item after item, Elon stepped forward. His voice was steady but gentle. "Excuse me. I'd like to pay for everything," she picked out. The woman turned sharply, startled. Up close, Elon could see the creases of a lifetime around her eyes, the stubborn tilt of her chin. "I can't let you do that," she said immediately, clutching her slim wallet closer to her chest. "I'm not a charity case." Elon smiled, not the camera-ready, corporate grin, but something real, something weary and kind. "It's not charity," he said. "It's just one person helping another." The woman hesitated. Pride warred with necessity on her face. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. The cashier rang up all her original items again, plus Elon's modest selection. Elon handed over his card without fanfare. When the transaction was done, he picked up both bags and motioned toward the door. "Let me help you carry these." The woman hesitated again, then nodded. As they stepped into the drizzle, she adjusted her glasses and looked up at him properly for the first time. "You're Elon Musk," she said. "Last time I checked," Elon chuckled, pulling his hoodie up against the rain. She shook her head, half in disbelief. "I should have recognized you sooner. My grandkids talk about you like you're a Marvel superhero." Elon laughed, genuinely this time. "I assure you, I'm very human. Some days painfully so." She smiled. It lit up her face in a way that made her seem decades younger. "My name's Ruby. Ruby Patterson." "Nice to meet you, Ruby," Elon said, offering his hand. She shook it firmly, despite the trembling he noticed in her fingers. "You don't have to walk me all the way," Ruby said, motioning toward an old red bus stop sign half a block away. "You're not taking the bus in this rain," Elon said simply. "Where do you live?" Ruby hesitated. "Not far. Just past the library, over on Bayview." Elon unlocked his car remotely. "Let me drive you." Ruby opened her mouth to protest, thought better of it, and sighed. "You're persistent," she said, climbing carefully into the passenger seat. Elon chuckled as he slid behind the wheel. Occupational hazard. As they pulled out onto the slick street, Ruby glanced around the Tesla's minimalist interior. My grandson would lose his mind if he knew I was riding in a Tesla, she mused. Well, maybe we'll get him a ride next time, Elon replied, grinning. They rode in companionable silence for a few minutes, the soft patter of rain filling the car. So, Elon said casually, what do you do, Ruby? Did, she corrected gently. Retired. I used to be an aerospace engineer. Elon's eyebrows shot up. Really? Worked at JPL for 30 years, Ruby said, her voice tinged with both pride and sadness. Back when women like me didn't exactly get welcomed with open arms. Elon glanced at her, intrigued. You were a pioneer. Ruby snorted. I was stubborn. There's a difference. She told him about her years designing propulsion systems, about the quiet battles fought in conference rooms where her ideas were ignored until a male colleague repeated them, and about the triumph of seeing her calculations launch probes toward Mars. But it wasn't easy, she said, staring out the rain-streaked window. When my husband passed, the pension wasn't enough. I burned through my savings helping my daughter through nursing school. Social Security covers most things, but not always the extras. Not when prices keep climbing. Elon felt a hollow ache form in his gut. Someone who had helped push humanity toward the stars was now counting coins to buy cat food. It didn't sit right with him. They pulled up to a modest apartment building near the bluffs. Ruby pointed to a weathered door under a flickering porch light. This is me, she said. Elon hopped out and carried her bags to the stoop. Would you? Ruby paused, the words catching in her throat. Would you like a cup of tea? As a thank you? Elon checked his watch. He had a conference call with Europe in 90 minutes. Plenty of time. I'd love to, he said. Inside, Ruby's apartment was small but cozy. Faded photographs lined the walls. Young Ruby in a white lab coat next to towering rocket parts, a handsome man in navy blues, smiling children at Christmas. Elon took it all in as Ruby bustled about the tiny kitchen, her movements slower but precise. She handed him a chipped mug filled with steaming Earl Grey. Best I can offer, she said with a smile. It's perfect, Elon replied, meaning it. They sat across from each other at a scarred kitchen table. For a while, they just talked. About rockets. About dreams. About how the world had changed, and hadn't. You know, Ruby said, tapping her spoon against her mug, I used to tell my students, it doesn't matter how big your dreams are. What matters is how stubborn you are when nobody believes in them. Elon nodded slowly. That's exactly right. They talked for over an hour, swapping stories of triumph and failure, dreams deferred and dreams still daring to live. By the time Elon glanced at his watch again, it was almost time for his call. He stood reluctantly. I should go, he said. Ruby nodded. Thank you again. For everything. At the door, Elon paused. Ruby, would you ever be interested in consulting? Maybe mentoring some young engineers? Ruby laughed. A short, surprised sound. Me? I'm 79 years old. My consulting days are behind me. Maybe not, Elon said, a glint in his eye. You might be exactly what we need. He left her standing in the doorway, the rain tapering off into a fine mist. Driving away, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had been the start of something bigger than either of them could see yet. And Ruby Patterson, stubborn as the stars themselves, had no idea that the best chapter of her life was just about to begin. The next morning, Elon sat at his kitchen counter, staring at a mug of coffee growing cold in his hands. His mind wasn't on the looming meetings, the shareholder calls, or the production updates blinking for his attention on his tablet. It was on Ruby Patterson. He couldn't shake the thought, how many more Rubus were out there? Brilliant minds who had helped build the modern world only to fade into the background once their usefulness was assumed finished. Forgotten, undervalued, struggling quietly in apartments full of memories. It wasn't right. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah, his executive assistant. Morning, Mr. Musk, she said. I have your schedule updated, Tesla call at 9, SpaceX review at 10, and the Neuralink quarterly check-in at 1. Also, you asked me to look into Ruby Patterson? Yes, Elon said immediately, straightening. What did you find? She worked at JPL from 1971 to 2004. Specialized in propulsion systems, particularly early Mars orbital designs. Highly respected, but retired with a modest pension. After her husband's death, she helped her daughter, Carla Patterson, pay for nursing school, depleting most of her retirement savings. She's been living in Santa Monica in rent-controlled housing ever since. Elon's jaw tightened. Anything else? She volunteers twice a month at the Santa Monica Public Library, Sarah added. Teaches kids basic engineering principles in a free workshop she calls Little Builders. Elon smiled despite himself. Of course Ruby would still be teaching. One more thing, Sarah said hesitantly. I spoke to someone who knew her from JPL. They called her a quiet revolutionary. Apparently, she designed an alternate cooling system for high-stress propulsion stages that was decades ahead of its time. Elon leaned forward, his heart pounding with sudden excitement. Is there any record of it? Just a few old internal memos. Nothing that was ever patented or formally developed. Of course not. How many brilliant ideas had been lost to bureaucracy, to indifference, to history? Thank you, Sarah, Elon said. Clear my afternoon. I need to visit someone. Ruby was sweeping leaves off her small porch when the black Tesla rolled up to the curb. She blinked in surprise as Elon stepped out, a slim laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Well, she said, resting the broom against the railing. If it isn't Mr. Musk himself. To what do I owe the honor? I have a proposition, Elon said, grinning. Ruby crossed her arms, amused. You're not here to sell me a rocket, are you? Not today, Elon laughed. May I come in? Inside, Ruby set a kettle on the stove. Elon set his laptop on the kitchen table and pulled up several documents. I had my team dig up your work from JPL, he said without preamble. Your designs. Your cooling system. Ruby froze, her back to him. I thought all that was forgotten, she said quietly. It shouldn't have been, Elon said. Ruby, your concepts are still relevant. In fact, they might be crucial for some of the Mars systems we're developing. Ruby turned slowly, searching his face for any hint of mockery. She found none. You want me to, what? Consult? I want you to help mentor a new generation of engineers, Elon said. And, if you're willing, work with us on a project I'm calling the Horizon Initiative. Ruby chuckled, shaking her head. You don't waste time with small ideas, do you? Small ideas don't change the world, Elon said simply. He opened the laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was a draft proposal, the Horizon Initiative, an elite mentorship and R&D program pairing retired engineers with young innovators from underserved communities. Ruby's throat tightened as she read. I can't, she whispered. I'm too old, Elon. My hands shake. My knees hurt. I wouldn't even know where to start anymore. Elon leaned forward, his voice low, urgent. Ruby, your mind is still sharp. Your experience is irreplaceable. And your story could inspire thousands. Ruby stared at the screen. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft whistle of the kettle starting to boil. You believe I can still make a difference? She asked finally. I don't just believe it, Elon said. I'm betting on it. The next few weeks were a blur. Ruby found herself swept into a whirlwind she hadn't imagined possible. Elon's team arranged everything, transportation to meetings, a workspace in a shared tech hub downtown, even a new laptop. You're not solving 21st century problems on a 2004 Gateway, Elon had joked. She met young engineers from all over the city, fresh-faced, eager, burning with questions she was uniquely qualified to answer. At first, Ruby was cautious. Unsure. She fumbled with the new technology, stumbled over her words in meetings, felt the weight of self-doubt creep in at night when the lights were off and the world was quiet. But slowly, she found her footing. One afternoon, after a particularly animated session explaining propulsion basics to a group of interns, Elon pulled her aside. "You light up when you teach," he said. Ruby shrugged, embarrassed. "Old habits." "Good habits," Elon corrected. He paused, then added, almost shyly, "I've been thinking. Maybe Horizon shouldn't just be about engineering. Maybe it should be about passing down ways of thinking. Resilience. Creativity. The stubborn refusal to quit when everyone else says it's impossible." Ruby smiled. "Sounds a lot like how I survived at JPL." "Exactly," Elon said. "And it's how we're going to get to Mars. How we're going to solve the climate crisis. How we're going to fix things that feel broken right now." Ruby looked at him carefully, seeing past the public persona to the relentless, restless dreamer underneath. "You really believe that," she said. "I have to," Elon replied. "Or what's the point?" A month later, they stood together on the stage of the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. The Horizon Initiative was launching officially. Hundreds of people had gathered: students, engineers, educators, politicians, reporters. Ruby stood nervously backstage, smoothing her new navy blazer, a gift from Elon's team. "You'll do great," Elon said quietly beside her. "I haven't spoken to a crowd this big since my retirement party," Ruby muttered. "Then think of it like talking to old friends," Elon said, smiling. When her name was announced, Ruby stepped into the spotlight. The applause was thunderous. She took a deep breath, gripped the edges of the podium, and began to speak. Not from notes. Not from a teleprompter. From the heart. She told them about little Ruby growing up in Mississippi, watching the Apollo missions on a grainy black and white TV. About dreaming of building things that could touch the stars, even when teachers told her girls like her should stick to something practical. She told them about long nights at JPL, running calculations by hand, fighting to be heard in rooms that didn't always welcome her voice. And she told them about Elon Musk. About a man who could have walked past her in that store, but didn't. A man who believed her story wasn't finished. The room was silent, hanging on every word. When she finished, Elon returned to the stage. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The future had already been set in motion. The Horizon Initiative was officially underway. And Ruby Patterson, once invisible, had become the beating heart of a revolution she never expected to live to see. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, after the cameras were off and the crowds had gone home, Elon and Ruby sat side by side on a bench overlooking the beach. The rain had washed the air clean, and the stars blinked shyly through the thin clouds. "You were incredible today," Elon said. Ruby laughed softly. "I'm just an old lady with a stubborn streak." "You're a legend," Elon said, bumping her shoulder gently with his. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the waves crash against the shore. For the first time in a long time, Ruby Patterson allowed herself to believe, deep down, where doubt used to live, that maybe, just maybe, the best part of her story wasn't behind her after all. Maybe it was just beginning. The months that followed were a whirlwind that neither Ruby nor Elon could have predicted. The Horizon Initiative didn't just grow, it exploded. The first mentorship workshops opened in Los Angeles, then Oakland, then Denver. Retired engineers, scientists, and innovators from every corner of the country answered the call, eager to pass their knowledge to a new generation. And at the heart of it all stood Ruby Patterson. She was there at every launch event, cutting ribbons with a laugh, shaking hands with wide-eyed teenagers who couldn't believe the tiny woman before them had once designed systems that helped touch other worlds. The media caught on quickly. "Grandmother of the stars," one headline called her. A hidden hero steps into the light, another said. Ruby tried not to let it go to her head. She still lived in her modest apartment, still rode the city bus sometimes when she felt like staying grounded. But there were changes too. Invitations started arriving, keynote addresses, honorary degrees, television appearances. Her old sneakers were replaced with polished flats. Her battered raincoat gave way to crisp blazers in jewel tones. One afternoon, as she stood adjusting a lapel pin before a televised panel on engineering education, Elon approached, hands in his pockets, a rare seriousness in his eyes. "You clean up pretty well, Patterson," he teased. Ruby rolled her eyes. "If I didn't know better, I'd think you were trying to turn me into a celebrity." Elon chuckled, but then his face grew sober again. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "Ask away." He hesitated, a rare thing for him. "I'm thinking about creating a permanent Horizon Research and Innovation Center. A place where young engineers can work alongside seasoned mentors. Labs, workshops, even launch pads for experimental projects." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "Sounds ambitious." "Big problems require big dreams," Elon said simply. "And I want you to help design it." Ruby laughed. "Elon, I haven't designed a facility since before you were out of diapers." "Exactly," he said, grinning. "You know how to build for the real world. Not just for the glossy brochures." Ruby's smile faded into something softer, something deeply touched. "You're serious." "I am." She looked down at her hands, these hands that had once drawn up schematics that pushed mankind into the unknown, and she wondered how many second chances a life could offer. "I'll do it," she said. Designing the Horizon Center became Ruby's new mission. She threw herself into it the way she once had with spacecraft designs, methodically, passionately, stubbornly. She worked with architects to make sure the labs were accessible for every student. She insisted on spaces for creativity, failure, rebuilding, because learning, she said, wasn't just about getting it right the first time. She traveled more than she ever had in her entire career, visiting schools, talking to teachers, listening to students. And slowly, the center began to take shape, not just as a building, but as a living, breathing organism. In quiet moments, Elon would watch her from across the construction sites or meeting rooms and marvel at the force she had become. Ruby Patterson was no longer a hidden figure. She was a tidal wave of change, rolling through every barrier that tried to stand in her way. One evening, after a particularly long day touring the Horizon construction site in Austin, Ruby and Elon sat on the edge of the half-built observation deck, legs dangling over the unfinished floor. The sun was setting, casting long golden beams across the steel skeleton of the building. "You're unusually quiet tonight," Ruby said, sipping from a thermos of coffee. Elon leaned back on his hands, looking up at the first stars winking into existence. "Just thinking," he said. "About?" He was silent for a long moment. "About how easily it could have gone differently. If I hadn't stopped at that store. If you hadn't said yes." Ruby smiled, lines crinkling around her eyes. "Life's funny that way," she said. "It turns on moments so small you don't even realize they mattered until you look back." He nodded, the weight of it sitting heavy between them. "And now here we are," he said. "Building cathedrals we'll never see finished," Ruby said quietly. Elon turned his head to look at her. "But they're worth building anyway." Ruby bumped his shoulder gently with hers. "That's the whole point, Musk." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light drain from the Texas sky. Neither spoke it aloud, but both knew this was more than a project. It was a legacy. Something that would outlast both of them. Something that mattered. The Horizon Center opened its doors 9 months later to an audience of thousands and a waiting list of tens of thousands more. Students from every background, every corner of the country, stepped through its doors carrying blueprints, dreams, and the stubborn hope that they could build something better. Ruby, now affectionately known as Professor Patterson by the students, maintained an office on the 3rd floor, a bright, airy space filled with rocket models, old engineering diagrams, and endless stacks of notebooks. She taught weekly seminars. Not lectures, no, she hated those, but workshops where failure was expected, even celebrated. Every broken prototype, she told the students, is just one step closer to the thing that works. And they believed her. Because how could you not believe someone who had built herself from the ground up, who had survived a world that wasn't made for her, and who now stood at the center of the most ambitious educational experiment in recent memory? One evening, long after the labs had emptied and the last echoes of laughter had faded from the halls, Ruby sat alone at her desk, staring at a design submitted by a shy, brilliant 14-year-old girl from Detroit. A clean energy propulsion system that, on paper, had the potential to revolutionize short-range space travel. Ruby traced the lines of the schematic with a trembling finger. She thought about that girl. About all the girls. About the boys. About the kids who had once been told, like she had, that dreaming too big was dangerous. She closed her eyes and let the moment wash over her. This was why she had said yes that night. This was why it had all mattered. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. Elon stood there, leaning casually against the frame. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. Ruby smiled. Always. Tomorrow, they would announce the next phase of Horizon, Project Vanguard, a plan to fund student-led missions, inventions, and startups. It was risky. It was expensive. It was exactly what the world needed. "One more thing," Elon said, stepping into the room. He handed her a small, velvet-lined box. Ruby opened it to find a silver pin in the shape of a star, delicate and shining. "For lighting the way," Elon said simply. Ruby blinked rapidly, overcome. She pinned it to her lapel with trembling fingers. "You're not half bad for a billionaire," she said gruffly. "And you," Elon replied, "are the best damn engineer I've ever known." They left the office together, their footsteps echoing down the empty halls of the Horizon Center, a cathedral of hope they had built, one impossible dream at a time. Outside, the stars blazed over Texas, indifferent and eternal. But somewhere down below, two stubborn dreamers kept building anyway. Because that was what hope did. It built. It endured. And sometimes, when the world was lucky, it soared. The months after Project Vanguard launched were some of the busiest of Ruby Patterson's life. Every week, a new idea arrived at the Horizon Center's gates: compact water purifiers designed by high schoolers in New Mexico, energy storage systems crafted by students in Detroit, bioadaptive materials proposed by a team of teenagers in rural Montana. Ruby reviewed them all, each submission a testament to the stubborn brilliance buried in places the world often overlooked. And even as her body slowed, a little more each month, her mind burned hotter than ever. One morning, as she stood watching a group of students test a prototype on the Horizon Center's outdoor pad, a quiet dizziness swept over her. She gripped the railing tightly, willing her body to stay upright. Elon, standing a few feet away, caught the movement out of the corner of his eye. Without a word, he stepped beside her, offering his arm. She took it, the smallest of nods passing between them. Back in her office, after a cup of strong tea and a stern lecture from Elon about pacing herself, Ruby leaned back in her chair and laughed. "I'm not ready to quit yet," she said, stubborn as ever. "I wouldn't dare suggest it," Elon said, though the worry in his eyes was impossible to miss. They both knew time was moving faster now. Later that evening, after the students had gone home, Elon returned to Ruby's office carrying a thin folder. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting across from her. "We need to preserve what you've built. Not just the labs, or the funding. But the spirit of it." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that?" "A school," Elon said simply. "The Patterson Academy." Ruby's breath caught in her chest. "A place where your teaching philosophy becomes the foundation," Elon continued. "Problem solving. Creativity. Resilience. Engineering thinking for real-world problems." Ruby sat very still, the weight of his words settling over her like a warm, heavy blanket. "I would be honored," she said, her voice thick with emotion. And so they set to work again. Even as the days grew shorter, and Ruby's walks grew slower, her mind danced faster than ever, sketching curricula, designing workshops, outlining plans that would outlive them both. The ground for the first Patterson Academy was broken 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning in Austin. Ruby was there, standing proudly beside Elon, a hard hat perched comically atop her snowy hair. As the cameras flashed and the shovels dug into the earth, Ruby looked up at the endless blue sky and whispered a quiet thank you to whatever force had brought Elon Musk into that tiny convenience store on a rainy night so long ago. She stayed involved in every step of the Academy's creation, mentoring the founding teachers, advising on the building designs, choosing the first cohort of students. But even Ruby Patterson, stubborn as she was, could not outrun time forever. One evening, sitting on the rooftop garden of the Horizon Center, Elon found her watching the sunset. "You've done it, Ruby," he said quietly, sitting beside her. "You built something that's going to outlast us both." She smiled faintly, her hand resting lightly on the silver star pin he had given her so many months ago. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "You showed the way," Elon said. "We just followed." They sat in silence as the sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Finally, Ruby turned to him. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. When it gets hard, and it will, when people doubt you, or you doubt yourself, remember why we started." Elon nodded solemnly. "I promise." Ruby smiled then, a small, contented smile, and turned her face back toward the dying light. A few weeks later, surrounded by friends, former students, and the humming energy of the Horizon Center she had helped create, Ruby Patterson quietly slipped away in her sleep. She left behind no fortune, no mansion, no grand monuments. She left behind something far rarer, a movement. Thousands of young engineers. Hundreds of new projects. A future that once seemed impossible now built on the foundation of one stubborn woman's belief that dreams, and dreamers, were worth fighting for. At her memorial, held in the grand auditorium of the Horizon Center, Elon took the stage, a simple photograph of Ruby smiling proudly with a student rocket project projected behind him. "Ruby Patterson taught us that the size of your dreams matters less than the size of your courage," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She reminded us that it's not brilliance or privilege that changes the world, it's stubbornness. It's hope. It's the refusal to stop building, even when no one is watching." He paused, scanning the sea of faces, students, engineers, teachers, dreamers. "And because of her," Elon continued, "a generation now knows, impossible is just a starting point." Outside, high above the Horizon Center, a new satellite launched earlier that week passed overhead, a satellite designed, built, and deployed entirely by Horizon students. On its side, in tiny letters, were engraved 4 words. "Keep building. Always forward." Words Ruby Patterson had once scribbled on a crumpled napkin during a late-night brainstorming session. Her legacy wasn't a statue or a name on a building. It was a movement written in stars. It was possibility, planted in stubborn soil, watered with resilience, and blooming now across the world. And it was just getting started. Key lessons from Ruby's journey. True impact isn't made by the loudest voice or the biggest title. It's made by those who show up, day after day, quietly refusing to quit. Dreams don't expire with age. They deepen, they evolve, and sometimes, the most powerful chapters are written when everyone else assumes the story is over. Legacy isn't measured by trophies or headlines. It's measured by the number of people you lift up to dream bigger than you ever dared. You don't have to be famous to change the world. You just have to keep building. Recommended books to keep building your dreams. The Obstacle is the Way, by Ryan Holiday. A powerful guide on turning setbacks into strength, teaching resilience in the face of adversity. Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, by Angela Duckworth. An inspiring deep dive into why perseverance beats talent every time, and how you can cultivate it in yourself. Pick up one of these books today. Read. Reflect. Act. Because somewhere out there, a new dream is waiting for you to build it. And the world needs it more than ever. Keep building. Always forward.